Streaming services. They let you watch pretty much anything you want, anytime you want, because they have pretty extensive libraries. You're able to binge whatever TV shows you'd like. They have algorithms that help you pick what other things that you might like to watch based on your watch history. And yet, something's starting to feel very wrong with them, if you ask me. They sound great, but something doesn't feel right. So what's up with that? Hi, my name is Kristen. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I make videos every Wednesday, and I like to talk about cultural and social issues, often through the lens of public figures and popular media, but not always. So how did everything go so wrong? Well, to answer that, we're going to have to go back to the early days of streaming, back when it was really just Netflix offering streaming services. Back then, Netflix was able to negotiate deals with TV networks like AMC, HBO, Starz, etc., and get very, very equitable deals, at least for Netflix, in terms of purchasing the rights to host certain shows, things like Breaking Bad and The Walking Dead. These very popular shows attracted all kinds of users to Netflix who wanted to watch these shows but were too far behind on the network schedule to catch up. And when Netflix did this, when they attracted all kinds of subscribers by purchasing popular shows at a very low price, they proved the viability of the streaming business model, and they showed that this is a good idea and other people should try it. And so they did. Suddenly, it wasn't just Netflix out there. You had Hulu and Amazon Prime Video also competing for users. And at this point, Netflix kind of had a problem because now they weren't the only streaming service offering to buy the rights to host TV shows. They had to compete with Hulu and Amazon Prime. This drove up the cost of purchasing the rights for TV shows. Just to give an example, in 2008, Netflix spent $20 million to Starz to purchase 2,500 movies and TV shows from them to host on Netflix for a certain period of time. These included hits like Spider-Man 3 and Ratatouille. Now, years later, Netflix would spend $100 million on just one TV show, Friends. The reason for this price increase? Competition among different streaming services for the rights to very popular TV shows, because at the time, the popular TV shows were really the thing that was attracting users to streaming services. It wasn't just services like Amazon Prime and Hulu that were competing with Netflix at this point either. HBO and other networks created their own streaming platforms because they didn't want to keep selling their content to Netflix or other streaming services. They wanted to host their own streaming platforms, so that added up even more competition. This is a situation where the myth of the first mover advantage really kind of shows up, where you would think that because Netflix was the first in this space, they would always be the best and they wouldn't have to worry about competition. But that's simply not true. A good idea doesn't take very long for other people to notice it and try to implement their own version of it. And that's what happened here. Netflix proved that streaming was a good idea, and so a bunch of other companies made their own streaming service. The first mover advantage might make you a front runner initially, but in the long term, it really provides no advantage whatsoever. If anything, it can be a disadvantage because you don't have anyone whose mistakes that you can learn from, and your competition can learn from your mistakes. Now, to add on to this problem, we actually see that one of our favorite things about streaming services, the ability to binge, turns out to make it a less sustainable business model than the streaming services would like. Because if you can binge whatever show that you wanted to see before your free trial ends, you can cancel it and not pay any money at all to the streaming service. So, what's a streaming service to do? How are they going to make money with all this competition? Streaming services were in a position where the good shows that would attract more subscribers were becoming ever more expensive, and the bidding wars didn't seem like they were going to be ending. They just kept escalating and raising how much they were willing to pay for shows. So the only real solution was to end the bidding wars altogether. And how do you do that? Well, you make your own content instead of buying other content. And that's where Netflix originals came on the scene. And then followed by that, Hulu originals and Prime originals. It's a lot cheaper to make an original show than it is to buy an already popular show from a TV network that knows how valuable the show is. So that's what they did. And some of their early originals were, quite frankly, kind of bad, kind of weird. You know, it's like the first pancake when you're making breakfast. The first one's never going to be that great, but you learn from your mistakes. With time and experience, Netflix started creating some pretty good shows that were frankly just as binge-worthy, if not more binge-worthy, than the expensive shows that they were buying. Additionally, because streaming services have a lot more user data that they can collect, like they can look at how long you linger over something, they can literally see what your eyes are looking at on the screen, they can tell which episodes you rewatch, they can see which parts of episodes you rewatch, they can see everything about a user's behavior in-app. And this gives them a lot of data that they can use to figure out what makes a show popular, what makes us like a show, what makes a show binge-worthy. And so they are able to use this data to create originals that are designed to be loved and to be binged and to keep us on their apps. So Netflix started making originals, and so did a lot of the other streaming platforms. And now we've got a bunch of different services that offer a mix of original content and content that was from a third party that they purchased the rights to. And you can choose between any of the services that you want to get your content. Doesn't this sound a lot like network TV? You can even purchase bundles of different streaming services. Okay, the bundles make it sound a lot like cable, but at least with streaming, you're not, at the whim of whatever programming schedule that some network executive came up with, right? At least you can watch stuff whenever you want. Well, you can on most streaming platforms, but streaming platforms are also now offering live TV with YouTube, Hulu, Sling, Fubo, AT&T. All of these services, you can get a live TV package as well. And you can start off with the basic package with just the basic channels, and you can pay more to get other channels added to your TV package. Wait, that sounds exactly like network TV at this point, right? Am I the only one hearing that? So far, I've attributed a lot of these changes from streaming services that become more and more like network TV to competition. But it's not just competition driving this shift to become more like network TV. You see, a lot of streaming services are literally owned by TV networks. For example, Disney is a majority owner of Hulu. Disney Plus is obviously owned by Disney. HBO Max is owned by HBO. And AT&T Live is owned by AT&T, who owns Warner Brothers, which owns CNN, TNT, TBS, and many more channels. So streaming services are acting like network TV providers because they literally are network TV providers by and large. As an aside, why are TV networks making streaming services? Aren't they just competing with themselves? Well, yes, they absolutely are. But in business, sometimes it's actually better to cannibalize your own market by competing with yourself than it is to lose your market share to a competitor who's not associated with you at all. So they've run the numbers and determined that it's better for them to lose some of their cable TV subscribers to their own streaming service, because otherwise they would be losing those cable TV subscribers to different streaming services. There's one factor that I have yet to discuss at this point in the video, and that's cost of the streaming services themselves. You see, over time, cost of streaming services is steadily going up. For example, Netflix just raised the price for their standard Netflix subscription from $12.99 to $13.99, and they raised the price for their premium subscription from $15.99 to $17.99. Hulu Live is going up about $10. They're going from $54.99 to $64.99, which is the same price as YouTube's live service. And Disney Plus, which started out at $6.99, is already going up to $7.99 a month. All of these have been monthly prices. Why are prices going up? Well, creating original content does cost money, as does promoting it. And many streaming services, while they are making original content, are still purchasing third-party content, which costs even more than making original content. But there's one other reason the prices are going up, and that's, well, the prices were always going to go up. You see, in business, if you are starting a new service or you have a service that has a lot of competition, one way to ensure that you come out on top, if you can afford to do this, is to price your service at lower than the actual cost that you incur. If your company can absorb the losses over time, then you will beat out less resilient companies who can't afford to price themselves as low as you do. So this practice of starting out with a really low price to get users on the product is just an initial price. They were always planning to increase it because they never really could afford to offer it at the price that they were initially. They were just doing that so that people would come to their platform, give them the user base that they want, and then allow them to slowly raise the price over time. Once the competition is beaten out, once you have a user base of loyal subscribers, you're able to increase the price on them because now they're willing to pay a little bit more. They've gotten used to having this service and they don't like the idea of having to go without it. Whereas, had the prices started off high from the beginning, people might not have signed up in the first place. Something else to consider here is the concept of the switching cost, which is basically like a perceived cost to switching to a new service. So it's not enough for a service to be cheaper than what you already pay for. It needs to be cheap enough that you're willing to go through the trouble of canceling your existing service, calling the new service provider, signing up for it, getting everything installed if you have to install things, downloading the app, all that kind of stuff. People like to save money, but they also like to save time. So you have to make your service cheap enough that they're willing to spend their time signing up to your service. But once they're on your service and you raise costs just a little bit at a time, now switching costs act to your advantage. People don't want to have to switch to a different service because that requires effort. That takes the time to cancel the existing service, sign up for the new one, blah, blah, blah. They just don't want to mess with that. So once you have your loyal users, you can use the concept of the switching cost to your advantage. As long as you don't raise the price too much, and as long as you stay in the ballpark of what your competitors are pricing things at, people aren't going to leave you over a price increase because the switching cost is just too high to them. I believe that over time, just like we've seen with Netflix, Disney Plus, and Hulu Live, streaming services are going to be increasing their costs because they can get away with it. You can boil a frog alive as long as you increase the temperature of the water slowly enough, and in the same way, you can get yourself a pretty expensive streaming service as long as you only increase it by $1 or $2 every year. As the number of streaming services increases, we're going to see a mix of low prices from people who are trying to establish themselves and high prices from services that are already well established and don't really have to worry about losing their main customer base. But once the dust settles and the market has become saturated, I think we're going to see pretty consistently higher and higher prices of streaming services over time, because if they're all charging higher prices, they can get away with it. There's no one better for us to go to. This problem of higher and higher prices and more options and really having to purchase multiple services in order to get access to all of the content that you want probably sounds a lot like the problems that plagued cable/network TV a decade or two ago. And that's because they are the same problems. Now we have cable 2.0. Now, streaming services aren't all bad. They're still in many ways better than cable TV. For one, they're not held to the standard of needing every show to get good ratings to keep their advertisers happy. Because if shows don't have good ratings, advertisers pull out and then networks lose their income. So they can make a lot more niche shows because they don't have to worry about the shows being appealing to a broad audience. They can make stuff that only appeals to a certain segment of their user base. And that means we get a lot more diverse TV. Additionally, streaming services are able to have a lot more representation of marginalized groups like LGBT people and people of color for the same reason. Unfortunately, the general wisdom in network TV has always been that main characters need to be preferably white, straight, usually male, in order for them to be as relatable as possible to as many people as possible, which means that we get a lot of very white, straight stories on network TV. But streaming services don't have to appeal to everybody. They can make shows that appeal to specific groups of people. Now, that's not to say that they don't have a long way to go, especially in terms of representation of POC people, especially Black people specifically. Like, you really still don't see enough TV shows and movies with Black protagonists, but it's better than it was on network TV. Another good thing about streaming is that they're not held to the standards that the FCC holds TV networks to. So you can say as many bad words as you want. You can have explicit content. You can do anything. You can be all Game of Thrones if that's your jam. Which means that we just get more interesting stuff. People are able to go deeper and darker with the subject matter on streaming service content. And that's good. Another awesome thing about streaming is you can take it anywhere. You can, if you have a good enough cell plan, you can stream stuff while you're on the bus. You can take your device with you when you travel, and you don't have to worry about crappy hotel TV channel options. You can just watch what you like to watch at home. And so these are some good things about streaming and reasons that I like streaming. But you gotta remember, capitalists are gonna capitalize, and these benefits come at a cost. So don't be surprised as streaming costs continue to increase over time. I'm curious, do you agree with me? Do you feel like streaming services have really just become cable 2.0, or do you think they're different? Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching if you got this far. I really appreciate everybody who supports me. If you liked this video, please give it a like. If you didn't like it, then feel free to dislike it. And do leave me a comment if you can. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!